Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. Shabbat Tov. Welcome back to Tzurba. Just a quick housekeeping announcement. Next week, there will not be a share because it is Erev Shavuot. There will be a different share throughout the night. I think I'm speaking at 12:45, not on the topic of Tzurba. We're going to be talking about AI. Everybody is obviously invited to come and join for that. Welcome back. Some of our regulars have been away, so welcome back to the share. So, we discussed, there was quite a build-up to the shir. Jeremy stood up on Shabbat, he announced, we're talking about opening cans and bottles, and this is a topic that every household is fighting about on Shabbat. So I don't know about that, but hopefully we'll come to a conclusion. We're on page 223 in volume 19 of Tzurba Rabbanan. If you're at home following with the book, or here following with the book. And so we started last week. We started discussing the halachot of opening packages, containers, etc. Very, very interesting topic. And the truth is, a lot of what's written in the contemporary poskim, right, written relating to a certain reality. Like any halachic question, we have to know. But this question is no different. Number one, you have to know what the halacha is. But number two, you have to know what the reality is. When we talk about halachic principles, how do they apply? If the poskim are talking about a certain type of can or a certain type of bottle, and nowadays the way that it's manufactured is different, so then that could change, obviously, the application of the halacha. The halacha remains the same, but we have to know what we're talking about. And sometimes this can be a difficulty with these kind of things. We'll see when we get to opening bottles, for example, bottle caps. It's well documented in the Shmat Shabbat Kilchata. The psikha changes a little bit from the first version to the second version to the third version, not because we just get machmir as the years go on, but because also that, right? But also because there were differences in terms of the way that things are made, etc. So last week we started talking about some of the principles. We saw the sugya in the Gemara of mustaki. I'm not going to go over that, what we did last week. If you weren't here, I refer you to the share on YouTube. But we'll just say this. We ended off talking about the question of opening cans, opening tins of food on Shabbat. We saw essentially three different opinions as to what would be the issue, if there is an issue with opening a can. Right? There are those who said that you take a sealed can of food, right, and you open it, you're essentially creating a vessel, right, what we call metaken mana. You are creating a kli, because until now, although it has the food inside, it's sealed. You can't open it, you can't close it, you can't do anything with the can. By opening it, there are those who said you are thereby creating a vessel. There are those who said exactly the opposite. Those who said, no, you have a can, which is perfectly good, it's got things inside. When you open it, you're going to break it, you are thereby destroying a vessel. And then there were those who said, no, actually, we're not concerned for either. Of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said it's okay, we're not concerned, you would be allowed to open the can over there on Shabbat. And again, we saw, according to the one who says that by opening the can, you are creating a vessel. If you would pierce a hole, right, before you opened it, so that would solve that problem, because you're ruining the vessel before you open it. If you say that the problem is that you are destroying, so then making a hole would not really help you. You're just destroying it even more. But as I said, Rav Shlomo Zalman said, particularly if we're dealing with essentially cans which you don't intend to reuse or are not going to be reused, you're going to dispose of the contents immediately. That would be, okay. So we get to page 223. Now there's a different type of can, which is drink cans. Okay, we spoke last week about sardine cans. That's what the poskim talk about, sardines and other things as well. But now there may be an additional issue. There's an additional issue to discuss when it comes to opening the drink cans. Why? Because, so again, what I said at the beginning, a lot of the poskim which talk about this, if we go back to, I did a bit of research on this, the old types of openings of the cans, where you have the pull tab. Have a look for a moment on page 224. At the bottom, there's some pictures. I don't know if you can really see that, but if you have the books, bottom of 224. So on the right-hand side is what we have nowadays for the tuna and the pickles and whatever. So you have the tab, which you lift up, and you lift up, you remove the top of the cab. So that's how the drink cans used to be manufactured as well until about the 1970s, and it got very popular in the 1980s, according to AI. That's like I said, we'll talk about that more on Shavuot. So I did some research. But have a look on the left-hand side. This is what we're all familiar with, the soda cans that you have nowadays, Coca-Cola, etc., whereby you don't actually lift the top of the can up, but where you pull the tab and it goes down, right? There's a piece of the can that therefore goes down, and it creates this very, very nice opening, and you can drink from there, or drink with a straw, or pour into your cup, or however you like to drink your drink your soda. Okay. Now the question is, so we saw that generally speaking, we'll discuss it in more detail today, but we saw an idea that when you rip something away, you rip open the barrel, for example, to get to what's inside, that's not going to be a prohibition. But if you rip it in such a way that you fashion a specific a shape or specific size of an opening that can go in and out, that would be a problem. It might be in a sort of a makeb patish. The truth is there might be a melacha involved here, which we don't come across that often, but we have a melacha of mechatech, which is of cutting. Whenever I cut something to a specific size or for a specific use, that is the melacha of mechatech. So have a look here on page 223. The Gemara Masechet Shabbat, source number 30. Here the Gemara says, Amar Rav Menashe, Haiman the salit silti chayav mishum tochen. Somebody who's chopping up wood chips, okay, very, very small, maybe using them for firewood, he is liable for the melacha of tochen. So says Rav Menashe. Amar Rav Ashi, ikapid amashachta chayav mishum mechatech. So Rav Ashi says, no, if he's particular in the measurement, right, he's cutting them all to a particular size, that would also be the melacha of mechatech. Now, it says here underneath, we'll see that from the continuation of the Gemara, it's not necessarily only for, say, specific size, but if you're cutting in a particular place, right, that would also be potentially part of the Melacha of Mechatech. The Gemara here discusses a little bit later on, brings a Tosefta regarding to cutting off, tearing off a piece of the wing of a bird. You want to use something over there, use the feathers, etc. So that is going to be that Melacha. So the question is, when one rips open the tab of the can, is that going to be this melacha? Is this going to be the melacha of mechatech? Is this going to be a problem? Because you essentially want to create an opening, you want to cut the opening in a particular size in a particular place, seemingly. So Shlomo Zalman Auerbach over here in Shut Minchat Shlomo, he says in two places, really it's in the same Tzurba, but we have two different passages, but he says that this would not be a concern. He says, source number 33, Af shebagolgalot asur lasot petach yafeh. Okay, that's where the Gemara talks about you have dates and you cut them open to have make a specific opening in the barrel or whatever it is. Over there, we really are fashioning a vessel that can be used afterwards as well. That is not the case here. We're dealing with a can. First of all, there's no meaning over there. You're very, very careful in terms of the way that you open it. Yeah, you just pull the tab. You're not going to any effort at all. And everybody knows that immediately after you finish drinking, you throw it into the bin or the recycling or whatever. And therefore, it makes sense, as Rav Shlomo Zalman, that when you pull the tab, you are just making a hole. You're not making a specific opening that you're careful about, and therefore, other examples the Gemara gives is if you take a sliver of wood, and again, you want a specific sort of size, you can use it as a toothpick, or you're going to make a special opening in this barrel, there is forbidden. He says, I don't think that the can is the same. Also in source number 34, a little bit later on, in the same Tzurba, he says, there's no, I'm not thinking about cutting to a specific size or making a nice opening. It's not that I want the opening of the can to be specifically that big, it's just convenience. It happens to be. That's where they've put it. That's the easy way to open the can. If it would be a little bit more, a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, whatever, I'm not so concerned about it. And therefore, it's for convenience.
So if I have a kavana to only drink half the can, and I'm going to use the kli to hold the half part of the soda I'm not drinking, is that a problem?
Of what? Of that which is inside already?
Yeah, so you get your full can, you open it up, no problem. I'm only drinking half, and I'm going to save the other half for later in the day.
So there are poskim will say you shouldn't do that. There are poskim will say you should pour it all out, or you should. But seemingly again, the question is how when we say, yeah, how long? He also goes, how long that I'm using it, and when am I going to throw it away? Is that going to be there? If you would say to me, my intention is I'm going to open it, I'm going to empty out all the can, I'm going to drink it all, and then I'm going to use it, I'm going to carry it around to have fill up with water or whatever. So then that would be a problem, because then you're creating a kli that you're going to use later on. If it's already what's in it, your intent is just to empty it out. So there are some who will say that's okay. There are some who will say that ideally you should avoid getting into that situation. I think we'll see it. We'll see it later on. But that is Rav Shlomo Zalman. You probably guessed that Rav Eliashiv is machmer about this. This is one of these. There are a lot of machlokot in these contemporary issues we see between Rav Shlomo Zalman and Rav Eliashiv. So Yani Orchot Shabbat. He brings this question. Also talks about some of the paper containers. Some other interesting questions as well. So he says like this. Source number 35. Sakit ni'ar hamechila kapit achat shel sukkar. Okay, sugar packets, right? This is one of those things. I don't know if they still have it, but it was a few years ago. They had on the sugar packets in Israel. You had all the different, Zion figures of Zionist history. So it's only in Israel, you go and you have Rav Kook like on your sugar packet. It's in any event. So there you have to be careful not to tear off Cook's face when you're opening up the sugar. But he says, can you just the sugar packets, whether they have Rav Kook or not on them, right? Can you open them up? Yesh b'rosha nikuva mesamin mikuma pticha. Right? They have the dotted line, tear open here. It's a specific place, or there's a little perforation. So yesh omrim shasur likot asakit mokom hasimun hazev yesh etilu b'zeh. Yeah, we have. This is exactly the machloket. Those who say that's the opinion of Rav Eliashiv would say that you should not tear it there, certainly not in that specific place. That's what we're talking about. He says that would be mechatech. You want to cut it in a specific place, and that would be prohibited. Rav Shlomo Zalman said that's okay. Now another case, this is gviei leben hamashuvakim bezugot. Okay, you have these containers of leben, or maybe you have yogurts and different things. Turn over the page, you have a picture over there, right? So you have them in the pairs of these containers, or sometimes they come in four, right? So to separate them, can you separate them before on Shabbat as well? Generally speaking, we separate them before eating them, right? Again, there's a certain place, you fold it, you tear it off. So so there are those who say, and Rav Eliashiv follows this as well, he says that it would, this is following his opinion. There are those who say that is going to be a prohibition of isur makeh patish, maybe of mechatech, you're cutting, separating it in a specific place. There are those who say you can separate them as well. We'll just see the last halakha, and we'll see the footnote where he explains it. And by the way, sometimes you get on these containers, it will say on the container, it will say on the top, asur lafred, you may not separate it on Shabbat. Right? So then people always ask, if you follow the opinion of Rav Shlomo Zalman, but your yogurt is paskin for you that you have to follow Rav Eliashiv, so you're not necessarily bound by the psikah of what's written on the containers, but they usually put the more machmir opinion there. But okay, the seder. I always tell people, this comes up as well. It always comes up at Pesach, where people always call me every year, and they say, there's a certain, we came from Chutz La'aretz, and there's a certain food we held in Chutz La'aretz was not kitniot. And here in Israel, it says it's kitniot, but it's exactly the same food. It's the same ingredient. So I always tell them, listen, the packaging on the label doesn't have to paskin for you. You can carry on what your minhag was. In any event, okay, this is not a share about hechsherim and what's printed and what is and what isn't, and I'm not getting into it. It's a very complicated discussion. But yeah, pachiyot, top of page 226. פחיות שתייה שיש בראשן סימון, אשר ניתן לפותחו על ידי משיכת טבעת ונוצר בהן פתח נאה. Okay, drink cans where you're going to pull the tab and you're going to open the can in a specific place. Again, that's what we said. יש אסור לפותחם בשבת משום חשש שאסור לעשיית פתח ומשום מלאכת מחתך. There are those who say you can't open it. That's Rav Eliashiv. He says you cannot open it. You're making a nice opening, and that's machatech v'yesh etilu b'zeh. And there are those who allow. So in the Ha'ara, the footnote, he says like this: Data Rav Eliashiv le'asor b'zeh mishum sheba'afradat ha'gviyim. Okay, here he's talking about the case, the picture you see at the bottom, separating the cups of yogurt, the pots, whatever. He says, magia gavia le'tzurato tzuya. Yes, but you want it to be a certain shape. That's the shape that it is by itself, and you're achieving that. There's a very specific place. There's a very straight line. That's where you want to cut. So that is what Rav Eliashiv says. Now, I got that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, להתיר בזה, יהיה לעזת. ואמר, תן לחוש משום יישום עקב בפטיש, מכיוון שצורת הגביעים כבר נגמר בבית החרושת. They've already manufactured these cups, they already have their shape, והשאירו אותם מחוברים באופן שיוכלו להפרידם בקלות. Meaning, again, how do I look at it when they're all attached together? Do I look at it as, we'll see, this is going to be very relevant in a moment when we get to the bottles, right? But each one already, it's sort of an independent entity, and they're just kind of joined together. Or do I say no? That when I separate them, I'm creating that entity in the first place. This is similar to the case of the mustaki, which we saw last week. The Gemara in Beitzah talks about a mustaki, which is a barrel which has sort of been broken apart, different shards, and it's kind of been reconstituted. So he says that each one has already got its own shape, and they've been attached in a way, but they've been attached in a way that you can separate them easily. It's not called that you are creating the kli now. The kli was already there. He says, mechatech is not a problem either. Why? You aren't makpid, you don't care if it's a little bit long, if it's a little bit slanted this way or a little bit slanted that way, which sometimes actually happens. That's not an issue. Right? All your intention is just to separate them for convenience, not that I'm not worried about the specific shape or the specific size. It's just more convenient to do it over there. Okay. Sometimes, by the way, a separate issue is that sometimes the writing, right, on the packaging, we'll discuss this later on, but sometimes the writing is placed in such a way that if you are going to tear them on Shabbat, then you're going to separate the words. So I think that generally speaking, most of the poskim recommend that you should tear them before Shabbat anyway. It's not a great tirchan, it's an easy thing to do. But if one forgot to, so as you've seen, there is an opinion that says that you could rely. So the Yalkut Yosef, source number 36, regarding opening cans. So he says, פחית שתייה שיש בראשה כמין טבעת, שעל ידי משיכתה נעשה בפחית כמין פתח לשתייה. Again, that's just a description if you were wondering how the cans open, right? מעיקר הדין מותר לפותחה בשבת. It's עיקר הדין, you can open them on Shabbat. Actually, Rav Ovadia writes, it's at the end of footnote number 27. Rav Ovadia writes in Chazon Ovadia, they say here, categorically permits opening a drink can normally. So he says that's the עיקר הדין, you could do that. שמאחר ואין דרך לשמור את הפחית לאחר שהתרוקנה. Again, the idea is the vessel's already there. What's in there is already there. Again, this, according to Paul's question, I think according to this, we would say that it's permitted. In other words, he's saying, where do I have a chashash of creating a vessel? Meaning, once I've emptied what's in it and now reusing it. That's what he seems to imply. But he says, I'm therefore not creating a kli. He says, nonetheless, okay, so there are those who want to be, if you want to still open the can, but still be a bit stringent, so you open it not the entire way, and then it's you're not creating a kli in any event. However, there are more stringent opinions. Okay, Rav Osner, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, and Rav Belsky all say that one should not open the cans on Shabbat. Source number 37. This is Rav Belsky. He says, "Min ha'ra'ui shelo liftoach klal petach satum shel shum min v'sug bakbuk pachit u'mechar b'Shabbat." He says, really, you should. There's lots of questions here. You should open everything before Shabbat. ואם לא פתח מערב שבת, יכול לעשות חור בתחתית הכלי ואחר כך יפתח את הפקק כדרכו. So that's what we said. He holds that it's a problem of creating a kli, and therefore he says that you should make a hole at the bottom in order to open it. But we've seen opinions this way and that way. I think the more common minhag is to follow Rav Shlomo Zalman in this regard. I think many people do open cans on Shabbat, but those are some of the opinions this way and that way, as we've seen. Okay, next. So we've discussed cans. Let's talk about packages. Over the page on 228. Packages, bags of food, snacks, cereal, sugar, condiments, packages of tissues, diapers, etc. So here, it's a separate question. We're dealing with a can. We've been discussing the issue of metaken mana, of creating a kli or destroying a kli, maybe boneh, maybe makeh patish, etc. Over here, we're dealing with the issue of korea, of ripping. Again, this is another malacha that we'll discuss in greater length later on. But let's just see the Gemara in Shabbat, source number 38. This is the source of Melacha of Korea. I think I mentioned this last week as well. This is one of those melachot that's difficult to understand because all the melachot are, by definition, constructive. One of the principles of melechet machshevet is that I'm creating something. When something is, when an ordinary melacha is performed in a destructive manner, so then that would not be any sort of d'oraita. The Rabbanan may still be. But when I have a melacha which by definition is destructive, right? That's a bit of a question. So generally we say when it's done for a koreh al manat litfor. That's what the Mishnah says. A koreh al manat litfor, which is when one tears in order to serve. So what was the case? Koreh Mishkan we have it. Where did they have tearing in the Mishkan? So Rabbi Rabbi Zeira they both said as follows: Sheken yiriah shnafar darna. Okay, there were these sort of worms which would go and they would make tears, holes in the curtains of the Mishkan. Now, if you wanted to fix it, so you could, it was too small. So call in bavatoflinota. You had to rip it further and then stitch it up, maybe stitch it up in a different place in such a way that it would obscure the fact that there was a tear inside. So that is the source, one of the sources of the melacha of Korea of ripping. So one thing which is discussed extensively in the poskim is milk bags. Okay, whether you're allowed to rip these. Many people nowadays just get milk in a carton, but I think you still do get in a lot of places they have milk in a bag. There's a picture at the bottom of page 229 if you're wondering what it looks like. And again, why is this an issue? So this is an issue because when we talk about other types of, we'll talk in a moment, other types of bags and things which you rip. You think of a bag of crisps, potato chips, whatever you want to call them. Depends if you come from America or England or Canada. Okay, but there you open it up, and again you eat what's inside, or you empty out what's inside, and you throw it away. The milk bag, you're using it. You put it inside the jug, and you're using it to pour. You're not necessarily just ripping and disposing. You want that opening in order to use it. So here's the discussion. We have a source. We have the Shulchan Aruch quotes this and again, that's why the question is, you're ripping it for a constructive purpose in order to pour what's from the bag. Now we have the following case, again going back to our dates and dried figs, which were a very common food at the time of the Gemara. So source number 39, the Shulchan Aruch says chotalot, these are types of vessels which they would have, which inside perush minei kelim shel tmalim v'gulgalot, you have dates, dried figs, etc. inside. So they're covered up and tied with a rope. You can untie the rope. You can even cut it in order to get into the kli. Even these containers themselves, not sure exactly what they are, but even these containers themselves, you can rip. Okay, you're allowed to open them up, rip them in order to get to the food that is inside. The Mishnah Berurah over here also says, "Mutar gam ken likor ha'or me'al pnei chavit shel yayin bilvad shelo yachaven lasot zinuk." In other words, they would have barrels of wine which are covered with leather or whatever on top. You can tear that. You can tear that off in order to get to the wine which is underneath. So from that we learn that anytime you have a seal on top of the food, you can rip off the seal to get to the food inside. So it says Yochot Shabbat over here. For example, coffee, right? You have instant coffee, and you have the aluminum foil or whatever it is that's affixed to the opening. You can tear that open to get to the food that is inside. So they say here, I'll just read the note that's in between source number 41 and 42. It says this does not apply to cutting open a bag of milk, in which there may still be a problem of creating a neat opening from which one may easily pour the milk. Therefore, the Ochot Shabbat writes that you may not open the bag normally, right? Whether you can open it in an unusual manner, that is a discussion. So here the Ochot Shabbat says as follows. He says, "Lekatchila yesh liftoch tzakit hachalav me'erev Shabbat." Ideally, you should open your milk bag before Shabbat, or just by a carton. Im shachach lefotcha me'erev Shabbat, asur lepotcha b'Shabbat kedarko b'chol. If you do not open it now, opening it on Shabbat in the normal way would be forbidden. If you tear it open in such a way that you can't use it, right, and you pour it all into something else, so that's exactly what we said before. That would be permitted. He says be careful about the letters as well. Now, nechlaku boskei zmanenu over the page אם מותר לפתוח את השקית על ידי שיעשה קרע בשיניו. If you do it in an unusual way, you tear it open with your teeth, which is hopefully an unusual way, right? או שיעשה סכין קרע גדול יותר ממה שרגילים לכל מיני תאכול, or you take a knife and you make a much larger opening than you would normally. יש המתירים בזה, ויש האסורים. There are those who permit, there are those who forbid. That is the Orchot Shabbat. Other poskim, like Rav Ben Zion Abba and Rav Malamed in the Pnei Halacha, they actually permit opening the milk bag. Normally, let's read the Pnei Halacha, source number 43. He says like this. Mutar la'asot chol b'sakit chalav kedei lemzog da'kot ha'chalav. He says you can open you can make the hole to pour out the milk bag. וכן מותר לפתוח להדבקה של ראש שקית נייר של סוכר, וכן מותר לפתוח שקית שיש בה סוכריות, או שם אחרים. Other bags, where you have a bag of sugar, right, which you have to rip open, or bags of sweets and other foods. He views them all in the same way. Says, וכן מצינו שתיאור חכמים לחתוך בשבת חותלות תמרים, that's what we saw in the Shulchan Aruch, היינו כלים שעשויים מכפות תמרים, שנועדו לשמירת התמרים עד שיבשילו. Right, these were vessels. They would use them from right. They would use palm leaves to make these containers, which would keep the dates, keep them fresh. The container itself, there's no significance to it. It's just there to safeguard that which is inside. Therefore, it's not significant, it's secondary, and it's like the same way you can open up, you can peel a fruit or nuts or whatever, same thing over here. Next paragraph says, שלא לעשות פתח בשקיות ואריזות שהמאכל נותר בהן זמן מה. There are those who say if the food is going to stay in the package for a long time, then we shouldn't open it. כדוגמת שקית חלב וסוכר, like the milk cartons or sugar, מפני שאם מתכוונים לעשות שם פתח יפה, שדרכו יהיה אפשר להוציא את החלב והסוכר, הרי שפתיחת השקית אינה קלקול אלא תיקון כלילה. That's the Svar of the Chazon Ish, that what we've said, that if you are making that nice opening, not ruining the bag, but it's really turning it into a kli. Same thing we saw by the cats. לדעתם הדרך היחידה לפתוח שקיות אלו על ידי קריאתו גמורה ועברת תכולתן לכלי אחר. According to that approach, you would have to tear it completely and spill out all the food into something else. So says Rav Malamed למעשה הלכה כדברי המקילים, because we follow the lenient opinion, שכן אין חשיבות לשקיות אלו, שזורקים אותן לאחר שמאכל נמצא בהן נגמר. As soon as the food is finished, you're going to throw it away, and therefore, מותר לעשות בהן פתח נוח להוצאת תכולתן, ולהשתמש בהן עד סיום המאכל שבתוכן. So he says you can open it up and use it. Okay. What about the other bags that we just mentioned? So number 44, which is the Shmat Shabbat Kilchata, he says, Sakiyot, asher regilim la'arik et tchulatan miyad im ptichatan, bags that are usually emptied as soon as you open them, right? Like כמו שקיות קטנות של סוכר, you have these small bags of sugar packets, ואריזות שונות עם ממתקים וכדומה, מותר לפותחן בשבת ויום טוב, packages of sweets, etc. You can open them on Shabbat and Yom Tov, says the Shmat Shabbat. What about packages that will not be finished right away? So in source number 45, I'm going to read to you in the English. There's a mistake here. The Hebrew text is actually the text from source number 44. So let's read the English. He says, even regarding containers and bags that are not normally reused after they're opened and their contents are removed, one may not open them on Shabbat and Yom Tov. The reason is there is still the potential for a person to keep their contents inside them after they are opened, so one should not open them even if one immediately disposes of the contents, right? And therefore he holds that you shouldn't open any cans, etc. However, okay, over the page, we can go back to the Hebrew now. There are those who are lenient, לפתוח קופסאות, פחיות משקה, שקיות ואריזות כאלה שאין רגילים להשתמש בהן שימוש חוזר אחרי הוצאת תוכנן, that you don't usually reuse them after opening them, והוא פותח אותן בצורה כזאת, שאין מתכוון לעשות פתח יפה לשימוש, ואם בדעתו להשתמש בהן שימוש חוזר, אסור לפותחן גם לדעת המקילים האלה. Okay, so to summarize, what do we say? We said as follows, that something which you're going to open, and when you, the way that it's done, there's no use of the container, the bag, whatever. As soon as it's open, the food is disposed, or the food is emptied and the container is going to be disposed. Again, our whole concern was, we said that by opening, you might be creating a nice opening, you might be creating a kli. So if that's never going to happen, and that's something that is always, as soon as you open it, it's going to be emptied out, so then there's no problem. Then there's no problem of opening it. If when I open it, I have the intention and I'm going to reuse the bag afterwards, so then that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem, and that one should not do. He has here a middle. The middle case was where a container that's not normally reused, but sometimes is reused. Okay, so there we have those who are stringent, those who are more lenient. But bottom line is, if you're going to open the chip packet or sweet packet or whatever, and it's one that's going to be thrown away straight away immediately, then that would not seem to be a problem. Like I said, despite that, there are those who are stringent, and again, if it's torn in such a way that it cannot be used at all, so then everyone's going to accept that. Again, you have to be careful about the words. Have a look at source number 46 of Simcha Bunim Cohen here in the Shabbos home. So he writes like this. He takes a more stringent approach. Have a look just in the middle of the paragraph. It says, when the removal of the enclosed item is a Shabbos necessity, right? If you've got young kids at home, you know that opening the sweets is a Shabbos necessity. There's no question. So it is permitted only to tear the bag open in a destructive fashion, like tearing it lengthwise, without tearing any words, symbols, or pictures. Right? That's the extreme case that everybody would allow over there. Okay. Now there are opinions. Okay, there are opinions that even if you are going to reuse the food bag, in certain cases, you may still be able to open it. So have a look here, source number 47, the Shemrat Shabbat in the Ha'ara, in the name of Shlomo Zalman. He says, Yesh sakiyot mechome plasti, ke'elu sheniftachot bekalut b'makom divukan. Okay, think of, again, like the sugar packets, which are at the top, they're glued together, but they're made in such a way, it's very, very easy to open. You're not really ripping anything. He says, if mutar liftoach b'makom hadibuk, that it could be that you could open it at the place where it's been glued together, even also without ruining it first. Even though when they glue it together, when they seal it shut, it's done in order to preserve that which is inside. It's done in such a way that it's very, very easily opened up again. It's similar to what we saw before by the puddings, etc. Okay. So there again, you can see there is a plethora of opinions here amongst the contemporary poskim. There are those who are more lenient, those who are more stringent. Bottom line is, as we've said, anytime I'm opening something, I'm not going to be using it for a longer period at all, or I'm opening it in such a way that it can't be reused as a container, that would be permitted. If I'm opening it in such a way that I want to still use it and still keep the food inside, the sugar or whatever, so even there, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said that if it's very, very easy to open, and there's nothing, not really doing anything, not creating a kli, that would be allowed. There are those who are stringent. Let's move on to the bottle caps. Okay, it's a very, very contentious issue over here. What is the issue with the bottle caps? Okay, so the bottle is obviously a kli. I'm not creating any sort of kli with the bottle. The question is the cap itself. Once I have the cap is connected to the bottle, but it's connected to the tab underneath. Have a look on page 235 at the bottom. These are pictures. Everybody knows what bottle caps look like, but we are going to distinguish, very, very important, between the plastic bottle caps and the metal bottle caps. Usually on the wine and grape juice, etc., you have the metal, and the other drinks you have got the plastic one. There are other things, olive oil, etc., which may have these plastic, the metal caps as well. And the question is, once I open the bottle, once I open the cap and I separate it from the tab underneath, I now have created a kli. I've created a kli in the sense that I have this lid, which can be used on another bottle, etc. So would that be a problem? So yeah, we have, as I mentioned, there's a difference here between the first version and the second version of the Shemrat Shabbat, based on different opinions of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach throughout the years. So the first tshuva in source number 49, here you have Shut Minchat Shlomo. He writes like this: "Says Al Dad Shelato Binyan Pkak Shel Pach." Okay, you have the metal bottle cap. אשר בפעם הראשונה שפותחים אותו נפרד ממנו חלק התחתון ונשאר כטבעת על צוואר בקבוק. The first time you open it, it completely separates the cap with the metal rim that stays on the bottle. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman, פשוט הדבר שאסור גמור לפתוח בו לראשונה בשבת. It's obvious and clear you may not open this the first time on Shabbat. מכל מקום, כל זמן שהפקק מחובר לחלק התחתון, אינו רואה כלל לחזור בו אחר כזה. Before it's been opened, I can't remove it, I can't use it as a cap to close another bottle or anything like that. ונמצא, לא נעשה פקק, אלא על ידי זה שחתכת את הטבעת מהפקק. It only becomes a pkak, it only becomes a lid, it only becomes a kli once I've cut it from the bottom, once I've separated it. And וכיוון שכן, הווה לוודאי תיקון כלי. And therefore he says, say תיקון כלי, therefore it needs to be opened before Shabbat the first time. That's concerning the metal bottle caps. Now regarding the plastic ones, see over here on source number 50, Shut Minchat Shlomo, he says, מה שכתבתי בפשיטות, לאסור פתיחת פקק הברגה, הוא רק שהטבעת הנחצת היא ממש חלק בלתי נפרד מגוף הפקק. You can see it in the picture as well. It's one entity. He doesn't say this over here, but I have heard, I don't know if anyone knows in terms of the way that they produce these lids. So I have heard that when it comes to the plastic bottles, it's already in the shape of a lid and it's just attached. However it's done in the factory, in the machine, it's attached to the bottle. But really these, it starts off as a plain clear metal sheet. And it's actually folded onto the bottle and it takes on that shape for the first time when it's attached to the bottle. And if that's the case, so you can see this has never actually stood as it's never existed as a lid before, which was disconnected from the bottle, from the rim, which is not the case in the plastic one. Okay, it's not exactly what he says here, but that may be part of the discussion as well. But he says essentially with the metal tab, it's completely connected. There's no separation between them. Whereas says מה שאין כן זאת פקק שנידון דידן גם לפני שקיבו אותו על הבקבוק, הטבעת זאת נפרדת ברובה מהפקק עצמו. Okay, here he says that it's not completely, even before they attached it to the bottle, that the lid and the tab were not completely connected. ונקרא לכל אדם שהטבעת הזאת היא מיועדת רק להידוק הפקק על הצוואר והיא גם יותר דק מהפקק. In other words, it's also a slightly different size. He says you can see that the rim is not part of the lid, but it's only there in order to keep it tighter, closed on the bottle. ולכן, אף שגם טבעת זו מחוברת בחלקה מהפקק, he says it's partially connected. מכל מקום ניכר ממש שהוא דבר נפרד, ורואים שהפקק הוא העיקר, והטבעת היא כמו אור או שעווה שמסביב למכסה. He says it's like the lid is the lid, that's its own entity, and the rim at the bottom, that's like something when you use wax or something to seal it around. Therefore, he says they're like two separate items, ולכן נראה לעניות דעתי לעניין נידון דידן, דשפיל שלי להסיר אותו בשבת. And therefore, says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the plastic caps, you can twist it and open it up and remove it completely for the first time on Shabbat, unlike the metal ones. You know, now they have something different. In England recently, they've changed the bottle lids, maybe in other countries as well, but they've now done it in such a way that when you open the lid, it doesn't separate completely from the rim. It stays connected to one place. So you just have it. The reason they do this is because they care very much about halakha, and they don't want anybody to be. The reason that they do this is because for recycling, because so that the cap will stay together with the bottle and everything will be recycled together. You know, everybody's very, very eco-conscious nowadays, and therefore that's why. Then, if you don't know this, by the way, if you don't know that the cap is meant to stay together with the rim, and you try, you're opening it, and you're ripping, and you're ripping, and you're ripping, and your whole hand's been cut up, and it took me a while to realize that it's actually meant to remain connected. So there's no question, right? It remains connected, and you keep it. There's no question. That would be, I think, that would be permitted according to everybody. But Shlomo Zalman over here is saying even where you rip it, that would be allowed. Okay, Rav Ribiat, the 39 Malachas, the grey book over here, source number 51, he says the plastic twist-off caps that are now in common use are, according to some poskim, permitted to open on Shabbat because the cap is complete and functional even before it's been sealed onto the bottom. The cap's designed with a small rim at the bottom of its attached ring, which allows it to fit onto the bottle and create a seal at the time of bottling. while preventing it from being unscrewed without breaking the ring. A bottle cap of this design is considered a complete functional vessel even before the ring is broken off. Therefore, opening this type of cap does not constitute the creation of a new vessel. Okay, what if you have the metal cap, but you forgot to open it before Shabbat? You don't have any other wine or grape. Just it says the Shmat Shabbat Kil Chatat, number 52. Yeah, so he says here, Mutar linkov be'ezrat sakin or afilu patish or masmel et michzeh hazeh im ein elav otiyot or tziurim she'yitkalkalu al yedei nikov. He says you can take a knife or a hammer and a nail if you're feeling particularly adventurous, and you can make a hole in. Again, here our issue is that you're creating a kli, which is the cap, by separating it. So if you make a hole before and you puncture it, then you can open it, and that would be well, it would be a kli shemelachto le'esor, which here you're using for a permitted purpose. So and then he says, "Az yemutar laset hamichzeh, ubevad she'aset hanekev gadol, ad shemichzeh lo yeh od ro'oi l'shimush b'torat michzeh." That's be a real hole, right? If it's just a hole, it's symbolic. That doesn't make a difference. Then that would not be allowed. Okay. It may not surprise you to know that Rav Eliashiv, who is stringent about opening cans, is also stringent about opening bottles and opening the plastic bottles as well. And it may surprise you even more to Rav Shavai, source number 53, as a Chuvaya and Minchas Asher. He actually says that it's all forbidden. Whether it's a plastic cap or a metal cap, he is stringent. He quotes Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he challenges him based on a Gemara, which appears in Makot and Shabbat. The Gemara over there, it's got to do with a new garment. The way it was in those days, that they would sew a new garment and the neck would be closed, and you have to rip it open in order to make it fit for wearing. And that would be an issue of makebet patish, maybe other things as well. But he says, he quotes a case, he quotes some of the Rishonim, quotes the Ritva and the Ramban. Have a look at the top of page 237. Says the case, the Gemara there is talking about an old garment, which one is already worn. After they would wash it, they would sew up the collar again. And then when you reopen it, that would be makebet patish. So if we understand that way in the Gemara, he says, it started off, it was a kli, but now it became unfit to be because you sewed it up. So then, since you've prevented the use in it, now when you go back, that's makebet patish again, and it's in Isur D'Oraita. So he says, he says we could learn from that Gemara to these pkakim, even if we accept that it was a kli to begin with. Now that it's connected to the bottle and it's connected, you have to tear it off in order to use it again. So now it's not a kli anymore. And therefore, when you open it again, it's going to be makebet patish. And therefore, he discusses, we have a lengthy tshuva, but he says at the end, Mishum kol zeh nireh לעניות דעתי, יש להחמיר בפתיחת פקקים בין שפך ובין שור plastic. Says Rav Shavai, I think that you should be stringent, whether it's a metal cap, whether it's a plastic cap. He says may even be an Isur D'Oraita. So that's a very, very stringent position. Again, we have certainly on the plastic caps of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach to rely on, and he says that it is permitted. Again, there are those who are stringent to open every single bottle before Shabbat. Again, if you're in England where the bottles stay connected, so then you're okay. You have other problems because you're in England, but that's something else. But in any event, that's what we say. The metal is a problem, and the plastic is not. Although there are opinions that are stringent. Now, there's a third approach, Yokut Yosef from Rav Ovadia, who writes that even Yosef, of course, is Rav Yitzchak Yosef writing, but according to the Psakim of Rav Ovadia, but he writes that even the metal caps would be permitted on Shabbat. He says, "Bakbuk metzanavim or tempo." Source number 43, interesting historical footnote. Tempo was once one of Israel's largest soft drink brands. Today produces beer and fruit drinks, and the brand name Jump, and is the bottler for Pepsi in Israel. Okay. So he says, Shesagur al yadei michse pach or plastic. Again, so we have the metal or the plastic bottle cap. שמהודק בצוואר בקבוק, ובעת פתיחתו נפרדת הטבעת מהחלק התחתון של המכסה, מותר לפתחו בשבת. He says you're allowed to open it on Shabbat. Why would that be? So he says, אין איסור במעשה הפרדת הטבעת של המכסה, משום מקלקל, שהוא איסור מדרבנן. You are, right, there's no isur of you of destroying, should be דרבנן, וגם אין איסור משום מתקן כלי. And then he says, המחמיר במידת חסידות לפתוח את הבקבוק, להפריד הטבעת במכסה מערב שבת, תבוא עליו ברכה. If you want to be stringent to it before Shabbat, that's fine. But now, why is that the case? So Rav Ovadia writes here in Shuti Chavedat, source number 55. He says like this: "Is nimtza shirov poskim val tzivam alif Rambam sovrim shegam kli shalem mutar lishbo b'Shabbat kedei litor mimeno ma'achal mashkei." He says that even if you have a kli, you could rip it in order to get inside, to get to the food inside. וקרוב לומר שגם על שולחן ערוך, אילו ראה דברי הפוסקים הנ"ל, היה פוסק להקל אפילו שלא במוסתקי. The Shulchan Aruch was lenient on this only by mustaki, but he says if he had seen other poskim who interpreted this way, maybe he would have agreed as well. We saw this last week. We saw the Rav Ovadia, right, actually rules this one of those cases where he rules differently to the Shulchan Aruch. But in any event, so he says, he quotes here Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. It's always interesting to see the language. So הייתי עושה בשמת שבת כהלכתה, שפסק בשם ידידנו הגאון רבי שלמה זלמן אוירבך. At the time of Shulta, our friend Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Agaon speaks respectfully, but so he says it's forbidden. Says Rav Ovadia, לדעתי נראה שיש להתיר. I think you can permit. שאף לפני הידוק המכסה במכונה בצוואר בקבוק, היה עליו תורת כלי. Again, what we've seen already, he says, since before you fastened, it was fastened onto the neck of the bottle, it was a kli. Even though now it's not going to be משמש מכסה בקבוק בעודו מלא, יש עליו תורת כלי, וכן אין כאן תיקון כלי כלל. Okay, so there are those who say, see in the footnote number 45, there are those who say that again the way the bottles were made in those days and the way it's done today is a little bit different. That even Rav Ovadia would be stringent, but it's going to be a siren. Okay, so we'll stop there, and we shall all go down to the miklat. Okay.